Content presented in Cheshire Corners is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a legal professional if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this disclaimer, this series, or the legal implications surrounding psychedelic substances in your jurisdiction.
Welcome to Cheshire Corners. My name is Rita Tsalyuk, and I will be your host as we trip through the looking glass. Today is a very special day. Today we have a new guest here. He is Hasidic Rabbi on Psychedelic channel. He has Hasidic Rabbi. We'll travel with Hasidic Rabbi through the looking glass. Mendy?
Thank you.
Mendy Sirota's here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward.
Yep. So please tell a little bit about yourself to our guests and tell them why they would know that you're true Hasidic Rabbi. How would they know that you're truly Hasidic Rabbi?
That's a tough one. So first of all, my name is Mendy Sirota. I'm a rabbi here in Denver. Grew up here. I was born and raised here, actually. And then I went away. I was here till 8th grade. Went away to yeshiva. Studied in rabbinical school in Chicago and Los Angeles, and then in New York, where I received my rabbinic ordination. And that's one way to know that I'm a rabbi. I have a piece of paper that says so. But and then we moved down here several years ago to be here for the community, to build Jewish life and to build the Jewish future of Colorado.
I see the sun come up this morning. I hear my children laughing as they play. The trees start singing without warning. It's gonna be a wonderful day. You know I got no patience for complaining, to stop and fetch about all the bills I have to pay. Cause even when there should be sunshine but it's raining, my feet will dance me to the kretschma anyway. So man Islam, Kaktila, the blessings they're coming, but you keep on running, just stop and sing.
And what means to be Jewish rabbi? Is that means that you may be connected to God, and otherwise, you're just in the middle between people or God, and they have to pray to you, maybe?
For Catholics, the act of confessing sins is typically performed with a priest within a confession booth or a confessional. This sacrament, known as reconciliation or penance, signifies the sinner's repentance and God's forgiving grace transmitted through the priest. Protestants, however, believe in the priesthood of all believers, meaning every believer has direct access to God. Therefore, they confess directly to God, believing that forgiveness comes straight from God and doesn't require a priestly intermediary.
I know we're praying to your wife most of the time, because if she does really good cooking, but do we have to pray to you, or just
So
how
God
that
forbid,
works?
God forbid. Actually, in Judaism, it's the exact opposite. In Judaism, every person, naturally, the soul of the person, their divine energy, their spirit, is a piece of God. So they don't need any intermediary. It's the person and God, right? A rabbi is there to guide, to mentor, to hold someone's hand along the way, to educate, to teach perhaps, but never to be in middle. And so that's how I see myself. I mean, in practicality, there's two different types of rabbis, really. There's a rabbi on paper, which is, in a way, you sort of covered a certain amount of curriculum. You've studied and learned and mastered a certain amount of Judaism or a certain amount of Jewish texts. And so you earned your title as rabbi, as Rav. Rav in Hebrew is a teacher. Is a Rebbe, is a teacher. So that's where it comes from. It comes from being a teacher. You've mastered the knowledge. You can now impart that knowledge. You can share that knowledge, right? That's one level of rabbi. Another level of rabbi is a communal rabbi, is a rabbi within a community framework where the rabbi serves as a guide to the community, as a mentor to the community. The rabbi wears, and in that sense, a rabbi wears many, many hats. There's events, there's for kids, there's for adults, there's for teens, for young professionals, for women, for men, for seniors. So there's a lot of different things that go into it.
Seems like this is kind of, I guess, have nothing to worry about, right? Talking to you.
No, I don't bite.
Okay, good.
Matzah I bite, but...
Okay, cool. So then my other question, you are Lubavitch Rabbi, right?
Correct.
And what does it mean to be Lubavitch Rabbi versus to be some other kind of rabbi?
That's a good question. So we know the for those that are not familiar, maybe the Lubavitch sect is more Chabad Lubavitch is what it's called. Lubavitch is a town in Eastern Europe or Eastern Russia. Exactly where it is.
Definitely not Eastern Russia.
Not Eastern Russia.
No.
But it was a little hamlet, a little shtetl, a little village that was started back many, many hundreds of years ago.
In 16th century? Or?
Yeah,
16th.
16th century. By a few Jews that wanted to sort of escape the big cities and sort of connect with their natural self, with who they were, and be a little bit transcendent and connect to God.
Well, I probably would need to correct you a little bit. I don't think they wanted to escape big cities. They were not allowed in big cities to begin with.
Right. So I mean within that, but escape the noise of the regular town.
Since we're not allowed to live in big town, let's just escape the noise
altogether and go in the woods. And so what they did was they it was a few people that sort of made this little colony, if you will. Okay, and it was near the river, and it was a beautiful place. It was near the river. It was surrounded by forests, and they made this little place. They built little homes, and Jewish people started moving into there. And it was a place where there were very godly people, very holy, special people that sort of converged in this place. And it was a place where it was a very spiritual town. People were connected with their spirituality and weren't really involved in materialism and other stuff. And they liked it like that. They liked it in that way, and they were able to connect with their soul and connect with the divine. In short, there was the Baal Shem Tov, who started the Hasidic movement.
In the midst of a century of murderous pogroms and crushing poverty, a wise mystic sought to rescue the downtrodden and revitalize Judaism. Known as the Baal Shem Tov, or Master of the Good Name, his joyous spirituality revolutionized Judaism.
And it's a last name, right? Baal Shem Tov?
This was his name. His name was Israel. But he was known as the Baal Shem Tov, and people can research about him. A very holy individual. He was sort of hidden who he was in his first part of his life. He was an orphan as a young child, as a young boy, and he was sort of this hidden righteous person. People didn't know. People thought he was just a regular man, but he was a really righteous man. And later on in his life, he sort of comes out as this really righteous miracle worker, really righteous man. His student was Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was authored the book called the Tanya.
The followers of Chabad Lubavitch refer to the book of Tanya as the Bible of Hasidism. It has spawned several thousand editions, was published in myriad locations across the globe, and it is studied daily by thousands of Jews, in private, in classes, online,
This is what the page should look like.
and through apps. Its author, Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi, was an 18th century scholar and mystic of rare abilities.
And he was the first Rebbe of Lubavitch, and there were 7 generations of these teachings that sort of carried on from this era until our modern time, which was Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He was the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he became the Rebbe in 1951 in New York. He escaped Nazi Germany. He was studying in the Sorbonne University in France at the time, and when the Nazis were coming into Paris, that's when he fled and he came to New York. His father-in-law, so his wife Rebbetzin Chaim Ushka's father, was the Lubavitch Rebbe at the time, was the 6th generation from this era that we're referring to. And when he passed away in 1950, his son-in-law took over in 1951. And he was the Rebbe until 1994, until he passed away. So, in a sense, he's still our Rebbe. He's still our teacher. His teachings live on. And so when you ask what makes someone a Lubavitch rabbi as opposed to a regular, not a Lubavitch rabbi, it's someone that practices Judaism within the lens of Lubavitch or Chabad outlook or frame of mind, and shares that approach to life and that approach with my community. So it's not something that I just practice alone, but it's that approach that I share with others, and that approach that I sort of share with and sprinkle that within our events that we do or stuff that we do within the community. It is with that foundation of what Lubavitch was, which is, in short, the value and the holiness of every single soul. Before the Baal Shem Tov came out as teacher and started this whole dynasty and this whole concept, it was very segregated. There were the Jews, there were the knowledgeable Jews, the rabbis, those that were able to afford to study and to know. And then, for the most part, many of the Jews were running from one pogrom to another pogrom to another pogrom, from one shtetl to another shtetl, barely surviving with their life, who had time to work on their spiritual life, who had time to go to school. Most of the kids were helping their parents on the farm. They didn't have time to teach them the Jewish alphabet, the Aleph Bet, or whatever it was. And then later on, it was even forbidden or whatever it was. And what happened was there was sort of like a split. There was the educated Jews, the ones that knew how to read Hebrew, the ones that knew how to celebrate the holidays, and then there were the ones that that didn't know. And the ones that knew sort of looked differently and sort of looked down upon the ones that didn't know, for no fault of their own.
Ronald, remember, when you are out walking, you walk past a snitch of that type without talking. Keep your snoot in the air and remember to snort. We have no truck whatever with the plain-bellied sort.
And the Baal Shem Tov would make it his point to go from village to village, just to ask these Jews, how was your day? How are you doing? And you know what they would answer? They would answer, Baruch Hashem, in Hebrew, which means, thank God. Now, these people didn't know how to read Hebrew. They didn't know how to keep the traditions. They knew they were Jewish. And they had one thing on their tongue, Slava Bogu, Baruch Hashem, thank God. And the Baal Shem Tov made it, he had a big following, he was a holy man. He made it his point to travel wherever there was Jews, to tell them stories of the Torah, and to say, how are you doing, so that they can respond, thank God. And then he would look up to heaven and say, God, look at your children. In middle of their day, they're chopping wood, they're carrying water from the well, whatever it is. What's on their tongue? What's coming off their tongue? Baruch Hashem, thank God. He said, look how holy, look how special your children are. And he taught that every single soul is a diamond, is so holy, is so valuable. Who are you to judge souls? And that is the approach, that is the outlook of how, of what the Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe taught us on how to look on another person. When you see another person, you're not seeing their external, it's their soul. And their soul is precious. And so because of that, everyone, every chance we get in the community, whether it's a Hanukkah event, whether it's a class for teens or a program for little kids, it's an opportunity to look at that precious soul and to help teach them and to help guide them and to teach them about their religion and to teach them about their heritage that they know or they might learn. But it's with a certain positive outlook. It's with a certain frame of mind, which may be different than if you didn't have that approach. The Lubavitch Rebbe would, in Brooklyn, New York, every Sunday he had a tradition that he would give out dollars on Sundays, and there were people that would line up to get $1 from the Rebbe, and they would have a moment with the Rebbe to receive a blessing. And the Rebbe would give them $1, and the Rebbe would say, when two people meet, something good has to come out of that for a third. Okay? And so the Rebbe said, you and I are meeting, here's $1, go give it to charity to a third person. And they had a quick minute to ask for a blessing, some guidance in life, whatever it was. And this line would go on for hours, 6 to 8 hours. The Rebbe was in his 80s. For 6 to 8 hours, standing up, going like this, handing people $1, talking to them. Jews, non-Jews, people from all walks of life, politicians, Israeli generals, people from all walks of life would stand in line and ask the Rebbe his advice. And one time someone came to the Rebbe and asked, forgive me, but don't you get tired? Isn't it tiring? You're standing here for hours at a time. Thank God you're in your late 80s. The Rebbe said, when you're counting diamonds, you don't get tired. And it wasn't just a cute phrase. This is how he saw an individual. He saw an individual, he saw their soul. It was their soul. That's who you are. And so that is the foundation of Lubavitch. That is the foundation of how we approach life, how you approach another person. Do you see another person's shortcomings as their shortcomings? Is that what's highlighted about the person? Or is what highlighted about the person their soul, their identity, their divine spirit inside of them? And that is what guides my everyday, I hope, and my interaction and my guidance with the community is on that foundation. So to answer your question about Lubavitch, that's
very cool.
A long answer, but
that's a long answer, but it's a good answer. And you know what? We're on psychedelic channel, and
right.
This is, to me, that is so relative to psychedelics, because if somebody would sit in this chair without your kippah, without your beard, well, maybe with your beard, without your rabbi title, and wearing hippie clothes, and we're talking about psychedelics, I think a lot of their philosophy would be very similar right now to this Jewish philosophy of Lubavitch Jews. And right now, the way we're looking at the mental health, and I studied Tanya with you.
Right.
So I think in 16th century, they were already looking into these things. So I'm curious how they were traveling from pogrom to pogrom, like you said. They were not supposed to live in big cities. They lived in shtetls. They couldn't be as educated as they wanted to be, and they still managed to get energy, creativity, stay happy, and move on and create like a whole movement.
Right.
What were they on? Did they take any special, I think all of the psychedelics, they have one thing in common, kind of. I think they're all serotonin based. They boosting serotonin somehow, little different ways. But what did Lubavitch Jews do to boost their serotonin. How did that happen?
That's a good one. So I wasn't there in those days, but I'll tell you. I mean, you see, even from the simple people that the Baal Shem Tov would encounter, they had struggles in life, right? There were challenges. And what did they answer when he said, "How are you doing? How was your day?" They didn't say, "Oh, you got to hear about this terrible day. I lost this last night. The Cossacks came in and destroyed this and took away this, and I'm missing my kid," and didn't say anything. Baruch Hashem. Thank God. I think happiness in general, it has to be a natural from within. So the question is, how can you attain happiness? There's the most the biggest economy or whatever self-help books is how to be happy. It's a big business. But really, when we recognize who we are and we recognize our inner core, and we know that we have a soul, and our soul is in direct connection with our body, that's happiness. Because without our soul in the picture, our life is like fragmented pieces, right? So I wake up, I have the family issues, I have the business issues, I go to work, whatever it is. My day is a bunch of fragmented pieces lumped up together. When I insert my soul into the picture, my soul is here with a certain mission. My soul has a purpose. And so when I connect my day-to-day activity, all my fragmented pieces that would otherwise be fragmented, and I connect it with a purpose, with a mission. Why am I doing this? I wake up this morning and what is it? Just the same routine? And no. When it is infused with the purpose and the mission of the soul, then there's harmony. There's inner harmony. There's inner peace. And so that is when you ask how to, there's obviously a special connection between the Lubavitch Hasidim that lived in. I would say that is by studying, like the book Tanya that you referenced, by studying the inner, the deeper meanings of the Torah, the mystical teachings of the Torah, which is what Tanya really is, sort of like a foundation of that, where it talks about your soul, and it tells you who you are, your purpose. There are 5 dimensions of the soul, right? There's the biological dimension, there's an emotional, intellectual, there's the transcendent level, and then there is what's called Yechida. It's like the quintessential level, the one that's connected to God. Sort of like a body. You take an X-ray of a body, all right? So here's the femur bone, here's the ribs, here's this. And what Hasidic teachings is an X-ray of your soul. And so when you intellectually are understanding and can understand and see what your makeup is, what is your essence, what is your purpose, what is your mission, what is your soul, that is the makeup of your body. When you connect that with your physical activity, that brings that inner purpose and that inner drive, and it just gives your day, gives your life at large a puzzle. It's not fragmented pieces, but right now you're on a mission. Right now so did something go wrong today? Sure it did. But Baruch Hashem, because I'm on my mission and I have a purpose. So I'm ready to go on to the next minute. I'm focused back on my mission. So yes, they had plenty to complain about, but they were purpose driven, and they were mission oriented. And the way you do that is by connecting heaven and earth, connecting body and soul. And the way we connect body and soul is knowing about the soul, is learning about the soul. And Tanya I would say that the book of Tanya is one of those ways that you can really learn about the soul. But that's really only in an intellectual way, studying it. Judaism has something also that we do as Jewish people. There's a tradition to pray 3 times a day, right? Prayer is also sort of like a lost art, really. But what happens when you pray? Usually, if you were to vision, in your mind's eye, what is a prayer? Someone praying, someone closing their eyes, right? In Judaism, when we say the Shema prayer, it's one of the most central prayers of Judaism. We cover our eyes when we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So when we're praying, we're also supposed to sort of disconnect, right? You think of the Eastern religions, praying on the top of the mountain, whatever it may be, sort of away from everything and closing your eyes and connecting. So prayer has this concept where you're supposed to connect with the intellectual, what you've studied in Hasidic texts, what you've studied about your soul, what you've studied about God, what you've studied about your mission, what you've studied about your purpose. And prayer is supposed to then make that emotional. Take the intellectual and now try to feel it. And when you do that, you're sort of then connecting what you studied and making that more of a reality. That's one dimension of prayer. Obviously, the simple dimension of prayer is connecting to God, physically asking God for X, Y, or Z, right? But prayer is also an emotional thing where you're learning to be communicative, you're learning to be expressive of your soul. So you've studied about it, you have the intellectual concept, and then you also have the emotional concept, which is prayer. But in short, it's knowing that you have a purpose, knowing that you have a mission, and that is to make God a home in this physical world, to make this physical world a heavenly home for God. Why do I say a home? Because a person is most comfortable in their home. When you come home, kick off your shoes, go to the fridge, orange juice, right? You're at home, you're comfortable. So God says, my home is not the spiritual realms. That's not where I like to hang out. The angels, they're comfortable there in the heavens and all that. God says, I want to feel comfortable in planet Earth. I want to feel comfortable in this physical dimension, in this earth. And God says, I'm putting you guys here to make that a reality. That's our job every day, to make this world a place where God feels comfortable, where God feels at home. And we do that by going to work, by building a family, by being charitable, by all the good values that we bring into the world. By doing mitzvahs, by connecting to Hashem, we are bringing goodness and kindness and godliness into the world. And collectively, when the entire world is doing that, that's making the world a place where God feels comfortable. So we're all in this together. We all have that mission. But I would say that they were studying Tanya or Hasidic texts. They were studying about who they are, what they are, why they are, what are they doing, what's the purpose of all this. And I think that brings tremendous peace, inner peace, and that leads to happiness ultimately.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm kind of listening to you, and I'm thinking that if we would have not used the word God, and if we would instead use the word another reality, transcendence, higher power, energy, I think that's what people using right now when they just expressing themselves and they think that they spiritual, not religious but spiritual. I think that's what they kind of, but I think they saying the same things that you do. It's interesting, specifically people who are interested in psychedelics and going through that realm and kind of looking at the world from the psychedelic lenses. I think they see pretty much the same picture. They see that everything is God, but they, might call it different. And they see emotions important. They also think not just actions, but emotions important. And that's all kind of comes together to mental health. Another thing I want to kind of discuss with you that interests me, the worst drug so far, everybody's saying that the worst drug so far is alcohol. Jews pretty happy and friendly with alcohol, right? And drinking, even on Purim you have to drink 4 glasses, right?
Passover.
On Passover, for glasses. Oh, but on Purim you have unlimited glasses.
Purim unlimited.
Unlimited glasses. But it's always done in some kind of a traditional, ceremonial way, right? So drinking for Jews never been drinking for the sake of drinking.
Correct. It's never an end unto itself, which is, in Judaism you have, it's more ceremonial. So every Friday night, I remember as a kid, and I may have told you this, but I remember as a kid, my, as a doctor checkup, my doctor was like, so no drinking, right? And I was like, what do you mean every Friday night? And my mother's like, looks at me. Friday night, we have the holiest day of the week, Saturday, Shabbat. That's the day God rested. And God says, I want you to emulate me, and I want you to cease to be creative. The whole week you're supposed to work, you're supposed to be creative, you're supposed to contribute to the world. And once a week, I want you to take a step back and focus inward. Not focus outward, but focus inward on yourself, on your soul, on your mission, on God, on your family, etc. So we have a tradition to have a special meal, Shabbat meal, and we start with Kiddush. We make a blessing on a cup of wine. But it's not wine to drink as you might envision, just to get calm or to get a little bit loose or whatever. That's not the idea. It's to make a blessing. It says that wine brings happiness, and so you make a blessing on something. Wine is something special. Bread, you make a blessing on bread. It's not that bread is supposed to do something to you. It gives you some carbs, but you make a blessing on a staple food, right? Bread is something that you survive on. And then throughout Jewish tradition, throughout Jewish practice, like you said, on Passover we drink 4 cups of wine, and it's for a specific reason. It's not let's go party and therefore we're going to drink wine because we're going to party, but there are 4 words in the Torah that allude to the redemption, that God redeemed the Jewish people from Egypt as slaves, and so to sort of connect with those 4 words, we have one. Like we make a blessing on 4 cups of wine to sort of thank God for that miracle. But it's not something to do. It's not something that we do to affect us in any way. It's more of a ceremonial thing, if that makes sense.
See, in psychedelic history, in the history of all drugs, right? Drugs were maybe nothing special, but at some point they were very much prohibited. There was prohibition on alcohol as well, right? And there was prohibition on all drugs. Then there was kind of a loose, do whatever you want with drugs, and it didn't go very well, and it got closed. And now we're looking into drugs and mental health, and we're saying certain settings in intention are very important when you're taking drugs. And if you're going back and compare it to the Jewish tradition of drinking wine, that's pretty much your setting in intentions. We're drinking that wine because we have a reason for it, because we wanted to say something, we want to do something important, and that's what kind of signifies this importance of what we're doing. So probably the same kind of approach can be taken to other drugs.
Right. I mean, it's something that in the Torah it mentions a few times. Yayin. Yayin is the Hebrew word for wine. Even shechar, which is beer. So it mentions alcoholic beverages, really, but it doesn't really mention. It doesn't mention specifically psychedelics or. In fact, there's an interesting story, and I may have said this to you before. When the Jewish people just came as slaves from Egypt, and they finally settled the land of Israel. And they built the temple. This was the first temple. It says Aaron's sons, two of Aaron's sons, were so excited, right? They were traveling with this like mini travel tabernacle that was going with them in the desert. Now they have this brick and mortar building, right? And gold and silver and all that. And they were excited. And it says that they went in, with a foreign fire. And it says they died. And after the story, it says God's telling Moses and Aaron, God is saying, now that they died, here's what you should tell the rest of your children, the rest of your people, how to enter the temple. Not intoxicated. This is what it said. It's without drinking wine, something of that nature. So these they weren't, goofing around. These were holy people. They were Aaron's sons, right? They were excited to go serve God. But ultimately, God is saying, without other substances. So, I mean, one thing that story sort of underlines is that, in Judaism, naturally when we say a blessing every morning, when we wake up in the morning, it's a tradition to say a prayer right when you get out of bed, before you get out of bed. And it goes like this in Hebrew: Modeh ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shehechazarta bi nishmati b'chamla rabba munasecha. And then after, there's a blessing that says Elokai neshama shenasate bi tohorahi. We say that the soul that God that you put into me today, it is pure. Which means that a person has really everything inside of themselves that they need to be able to reach any level that they want to reach. They have it in them. The soul that we have inside of us, it's pure. It's a piece of divinity. It's a piece of God. So we have that inside of us. The question is just, how do we access it? How do we tap into it? How do we get there, right? It's not really about having shortcuts or other mechanisms. So like going back to about alcohol or whatever. It's not that the alcohol is about it's more when we drink alcohol, we say something called l'chaim. What does l'chaim mean? L'chaim means to life. To life. Another word of it is mashke. Mashke means to transmit. Right? We're not drinking just for the sake of drinking. We're drinking to get. We're saying l'chaim. We're not drinking. I remember when I was in yeshiva, my teacher, my mentor, always said, drinking. It's not a Jewish thing. When you consume alcohol and you're saying l'chaim, not just saying the word, but you're drinking it and you're saying l'chaim. It's a different type of drinking, right? You're connecting to something. You're sitting with a friend and you're connecting to deeper parts of yourself and trying to grow and become better people, right? It's not to become less inhibited and less in control of your faculties. Judaism says you should be in full control of your faculties, right? You want to. Basically, Judaism doesn't condone being less in control of your faculties. Judaism wants you to be balabas, in charge of your faculties. And then God says, I gave you everything you need. Now, sometimes, for health reasons, or like you're saying, mental health reasons, there is place for something like this where it helps someone going through chemo or something like that, where there's physical health requirements or stuff like that. There's
mental health
requirements there when sanctioned by a professional. So obviously there's a mitzvah in the Torah to take care of a person's health. The Torah says that a person is required to take care of their body. Our body is like a loan, is loaned to us from God, basically. That's why in Jewish tradition, you're not meant to have a tattoo. You're not meant to, to alter your body in any way, because your body is sort of God's, and your God sort of loaned it to you to take care of. And so God says, take care of it. So if there's something that you can do to take care of your body, that's what Torah wants you to do.
What if you have a health problem with your soul?
Right, what do you mean?
Mental health problems. This is not a body. This is a problem with your soul.
Right. So the soul ultimately is pure. The soul,
Pure, but maybe it's sad.
right?
It's
but-
broken.
Right, but
crying.
the different dimension of the soul, maybe, right? But the essence of the soul remains intact all the time. That's why there's different dimensions of the soul. The way the soul, what it could be is that that the soul is not connected properly within the body, so there's a disconnect, which is making that feel. But if the soul is connected properly with the body, I don't mean if the body is living, that means the soul is connected with the body. But I mean, if the soul is consciously working in tandem with the body.
Yeah. But if there is not a tandem, if sometimes things getting broken, right?
Yeah.
And we have mental health crisis everywhere right now. So apparently, I'm not sure at which connections they're getting broken.
Right.
But some, looks like they are getting broken somehow. So
And sometimes in life, you need a reboot. If someone is in a coma, God forbid, right? And the doctor has to prescribe a large dose of something to sort of shock the system sometimes, right? Someone is in cardiac arrest. What do? We have we sort of shock the heart. Is that normal? Is that something that we say, everyone, you wake up today and you were shocking your heart? No, it's in certain circumstances where someone needs that. Then they have this stuff. Someone's in a coma and they need an intense dosage of whatever medicine to get them out of a coma. Obviously, that's what should be done. But is that something that should be the norm for people? No, right? That's not the norm. It's not generally the norm. But in a case where it's required, obviously that's done. So I would say the same thing is with over here. If someone needs a shock to the system sometimes to get them to a certain place to fix something, that's another story. But does it mean that is the first approach? The first approach in Judaism is that the natural approach, which is we have our soul inside of us. Study about your soul. What is it? What is the makeup of it? What is my mission? What is my purpose? And see how that inspires your life. Think about sports, for example. If someone's doing a sports or running a marathon, to run the marathon, you're not gonna, I think it's illegal. So you have to do it naturally. You have to condition yourself. You have to practice, right? And now you're ready. You've been running, you've been practicing. You're ready to compete in the marathon. You're ready to run the marathon. You want to play sports? You can't spike your baseball. You can't spike yourself. You have to be conditioned and ready to play the sport, right? And so ultimately, it has to be natural. And so the same is true in life in general. That one should be, in full control of their faculties and be. And try to really get to their core, get to who they are as a person. Sometimes the system needs a reboot. Sometimes the system needs a shock, or But I don't know if that's the natural way but definitely is there, and Torah wants us to take care of our body. And when I say body, I mean mental health as well. This is something that is...
So the way I understand, tell me if I've got it wrong or not. I think there's no prohibition against any substances that will benefit us and help our health, mental health, and well-being.
I'd say correct. There's actually what I'm saying is there's a mitzvah to take care of.
It's even a mitzvah.
It's a mitzvah to take care of your well-being, to
and
take care of
mitzvah
your
for
body.
everybody is a good deed, right?
Loosely translated. A mitzvah
Loosely
can mean,
translated.
also it can mean a connection, it can mean a command from God, it can mean a way to connect to Hashem, to God.
That's actually a good thing to do if it benefits your health, your well-being, somebody else's health, somebody else's well-being. Torah doesn't provide a specific list of substances not to be used or to be used.
No.
It leaves us up to us.
It tells us to take care of our bodies.
It
tells us to take care of ourselves. When I say body, I'm
ourselves.
translating the word, but it tells us to take care of yourself, to take care of your physical well-being, physical, emotional, mental well-being.
And then right now, when we're getting through the psychedelic renaissance, another thing that's considered to be very important is that's what's called integration. So they say that when patient or person goes through the psychedelic experience and getting that reboot that you described, they have to think about it and they have to integrate it into their life so their life is not going to depend on reboots. You don't want to reboot every 5 minutes.
Right.
You want to get the most of what you get and then, worry about reaching your goals, be as good human being as you can, make heaven and earth
Connected.
and connect to God and to everybody else.
Right.
So it seems like I don't see any discrepancy so far.
I mean, Torah prohibits anything that can hurt a person. So
Right.
if there's a substance that can hurt a person, then Torah prohibits it. So,
But what about the substances that can hurt person but also can help person?
Right.
Let's say knife.
right,
It can hurt person.
Right.
But we're using it all the time when you cut in the bread. It
Right.
helps us, right?
right,
So
right. Yeah, and this is just reminds me of a story. Once there was a girl that asked the Lubavitch Rabbi, nuclear energy, good or bad? And the Rabbi said this response that you just said. Tell me, do you have a knife in your kitchen? She said, yes. Good or bad? He said, well, it depends what you're cutting, right? So nuclear energy, the same thing. So the same thing is with this. If a person needs, and it's helping a person, it's one thing. But if it's destroying a person's life, and alcohol can be something that can destroy a person's life. Everything in moderation, right? We're a moderation drive. Everything in moderation. So the same is true with alcohol and with any substance, really, right? Alcohol can be something that can destroy a person's life. And so I would say that these things should never be as an end to itself, right? I'm gonna just go have alcohol and I'm just gonna go have psychedelic. If it's helping a person, so then Torah says, do what you can to take care of your body. At the flip side, Torah also says, don't hurt your body, right? So if this is going to be something that's going to ultimately hurt a person, then Torah says, stay away from it, right? Now, that can be psychedelics, that can be drugs, that can be anything, really. That could be consuming stones, I don't know, anything, wild, poisonous mushrooms. It's bad for your body, don't take it, right? So anything that can be hurtful to a person, Torah says, stay away from. Torah says, guard your eyes. Watch over what you're seeing. Why? Because your eyes, what you're seeing can also affect your soul. It can affect your emotions. It can affect who you are and what you are. And so Torah says, guard your eyes. And so really, Torah is concerned about the individual, what your intake is, be it what you're consuming, what you're seeing, what you're hearing. Protect yourself. And just make sure that whatever your intake is only positive and will bring positivity to your life. If it's something that can hurt you in any capacity, then you got to look twice and see if that's something that's worth it.
And see, with all this new research and all these new regulations in 2025, this is going to be just our normal life here in Colorado. We're going to have this, seriously, yeah. We're going to have healing centers. We're going to have facilitators. We're going to have this legal way of people of consuming. And I think it's just up to us in Colorado and up to all of us to make sure that we're bringing it to the pedestal and we're making sure that we treating it with such respect. God giving us right now a very important, very powerful, and very, powerful, scary tools that can be dangerous and can be beautiful at the same time.
Right.
It's up to us to make it beautiful.
Right. Like everything in the world, we have a chance to elevate it. Everything that we do in our daily occurrence is to elevate that concept, not necessarily maybe that individual thing, but the human being on the top of the pyramid, if you will, of the vegetable world, of the inanimate object world. Doesn't mean that we're going to go, start consuming rocks, but it means that everything in the world, every concept of the world, we have an ability, if we so choose to act on it, to elevate that, to connect it with our divine mission. Which means there's no part of the world that's sort of fragmented or separate from this divine mission that God has, or vision for the world. We're all in this together, right? The plant world, the animal world, the inanimate object world, etc. So ultimately, everything has to be with that lens. Is this helping me fulfill my mission? Is this helping bring godliness into the world? Is this bringing positivity into the world? Or is this hurting that mission? And that's how we guide our life. That's how we look at our day-to-day activity. Obviously, for health-wise and stuff like that, that is something that Torah says, take care of yourself and listen to doctors. And it says that that God gives power to doctors to heal. And that's why we are meant to seek counsel and to heed their advice, because God gives special healing powers to doctors. So,
well, thank you, Mendy. I appreciate you. I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation and sees that we're not really different. We are thinking the same. Everybody who's working in psychedelics, everybody who is teaching Judaism, we still trying the same thing, to make heaven and earth here, to make a place where God wants to live here, to make a place good enough for God to live here. Beautiful. So like us, please, comment, tell us if you disagree. We'll be happy to hear from you, and we appreciate Rabbi coming here for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do it again.